The DVDs arrived from the manufacturer today, so I thought I'd put together this short walkthrough of the DVD to show you what Ashley and I have put together here. It's called Tying Tenkara Flies, and if you love Tenkara fly tying like we do, I think you're really going to love this DVD. If you're just getting into Tenkara fly tying, there is no better way to learn about tying Tenkara flies than this DVD. The disc starts out with some short introductory videos. First, Dr. Hisao Ishigaki, of course, counsels against worrying too much about the fly while you are fishing. Dr. Ishigaki has a very simple approach to fly tying. He ties just one fly, and he pretty much encourages you not to worry too much about the fly that you're selecting and to do your Tenkara fly tying or whatever you're going to do for different reasons than trying to match the hatch.
で、毛針がですね、悪いから自分の毛針が合ってないんじゃないかと、自分の毛針を魚がですね、こう気に入ってくれてないんじゃないかと思ってる間は、絶対にその人はうまくなりません。毛針にですね、こう迷いがなくなった時、毛針は何でもいいんだというふうに思った時からですね、実はその人の腕が釣れるようになります。
Then Daniel Galhardo of Tenkara USA talks about fishing these reverse hackle flies, which really open up a lot of opportunities for new techniques because of the reverse hackle.
In faster mountain streams, the pulsating movement, when you're playing the fly, can attract fish, and it can also resist when you're pulling it or when you're fishing in fast water. The fly doesn't get very streamlined and pulled out of the water.
Daniel has traveled extensively in Japan, and he shares with us some of what he's learned from Tenkara masters and Tenkara fly tyers in Japan, and gets into some exotic patterns such as the mamushi kebari, which is tied with snakeskin, and another fly that's tied with the fuzz of a very particular fern, the zenmai fern. This is just a very interesting talk from Daniel Galhardo. And finally, Chris Stewart of tenkarabum.com offers some practical advice for beginning fly tyers.
It is possible to save money tying flies, but only if you buy the materials that you use, or perhaps I should rephrase that, only if you use the materials you buy.
The first pattern that you will learn to tie on this DVD is the Ishigaki kebari, and you will see it tied by 3 different fly tyers. First up is Dr. Ishigaki himself, who usually ties his fly in about 65 seconds, but here he takes his time and talks us through the process. He has a very straightforward approach to fly tying that really values speed over detail. He uses common sewing thread and whatever hackle is available and just ties his fly as fast as he can. Next up is Daniel Galhardo, who ties a version of the fly that's pretty close to Dr. Ishigaki's, but he uses what he calls a couple little tweaks.
Also, I like to have the curve facing up. When you're wrapping the feather around here, sometimes the dull side wants to be on the back, and to get around that, just change the direction that you're spinning the hackle. And now the dull side is facing forward.
And finally, Chris Stewart ties his version of the Ishigaki kebari. Chris's is far more carefully crafted. He uses touching turns, and he pays a lot of attention to detail, as you can see here.
If you can spin the bobbin a little bit in a counterclockwise motion, and that will flatten out at least this particular thread, the uni thread. And by flattening out the thread, you can further taper the body.
Next up on the DVD are 3 more Japanese patterns that are commonly tied in Japan. First, Daniel ties the Amano kebari, which is the signature fly of the Tenkara master, Mr. Katsutoshi Amano.
And some people will say that the peacock curl is an effective way of keeping the hackle from brushing back and getting stuck to the body and not having the action. So in a way, it might keep the fly alive longer, if you will.
And from this point on, the DVD really becomes the Chris Stewart show. Chris ties most of the flies on the DVD. Chris, as you may know, is one of the most prolific and creative fly tiers in the U.S. And really loves Tenkara flies. He is seen here tying the sakakibara, sakasa kebari, which is the signature fly of the man known as the Tenkara demon in Japan, Tenkara master Sakakibara Masami.
Another very simple tie, big fly, big fish.
Next, Chris ties his version of the Takayama sakasa kebari, a legendary fly in Japan that originated in the Takayama region.
And again, if you stroke it forwards after each turn, sometimes you'll get just a perfect sakasa kebari shape the first go-round without having any barbs trapped on the wrong side of the thread.
At this point, the DVD starts going away from the strict Japanese Tenkara playbook and gets into some patterns that are hybrids. Chris is particularly fond of adapting the British soft hackle flies to the sakasa kebari form, and he gets in a little bit into why he likes to do that here.
I was fortunate enough to be able to fish with Yvon Chenard for a day, and he is an avid Tenkara angler, and he spent most of the day fishing soft hackles. You don't have to fish traditional Tenkara flies to fish with a Tenkara rod, or to do Tenkara fishing for that matter. And I've talked frequently about how the sakasa kebari flies are very similar to the British soft hackles. This is essentially a British soft hackle tied with the same steps that I use for a sakasa kebari. So you can use the same steps to tie both flies, both types of flies.
Chris also ties the Stewart Black Spider, originally developed by W.C. Stewart, the Tummel style sakasa kebari, which is based on a fly used in Scotland's Tummel River, and the pheasant tail sakasa kebari, based on Frank Sawyer's pheasant tail nymph.
And the little fibers stand out and look an awful lot like the gills on a nymph, and it's just a very effective fly.
After covering Britain, we now move to American-originated flies. Chris ties a fly called the sakasa copperbari, which he developed loosely based on the copper john nymph. This is a really effective fly when you need a sakasa kebari that will sink fast, and you'll see on the DVD footage of Chris using the copperbari on the Gallatin River to catch trout after trout after trout.
But what was interesting this time is I had two flies identical, except that one fly had the copper-colored body and the other fly had an olive green wire for the body. And even though they were exactly the same fly with just the difference being the color, every single fish I caught was on the copper body, the copper-colored body as opposed to the olive. And I don't think that completely negates the one fly approach, because it is possible, because of the copper fly being further up the line, they would see that first and just hit the first fly they saw. But it is a little interesting that every single fish came on the copper colored, and I had no hits at all on the olive colored, even though it's, other than the color, it's identical fly.
The peacock herl sakasa kebari mixes the Takayama sakasa kebari with the Royal Coachman. And Chris also ties Ashley's punk rock sakasa kebari, which, as Chris points out, is a very effective fly.
And I have fished this fly, and I've caught fish on this fly. And actually, on the day that I fished it, on the stream that I fished it, I outfished Dr. Ishigaki with this fly.
And then Chris ties Hans Wielandman's CDC and elk, which is not in any way a Tenkara fly, but it is very fun to fish with a Tenkara rod, and many Tenkara anglers, especially in the U.S., use this fly a lot. The fly uses the Col de Canard, or CDC feather, and Chris offers some practical advice on dealing with this slippery feather.
Tie it in with the soft loop. 2 wraps. The third wrap goes underneath the end of the feather, and the fourth wrap on top and that traps the feather in so it won't slide out. It's kind of slick, and that will trap it.
And no DVD that includes Chris Stewart tying flies would be complete without Chris Stewart tying Frank Sawyer's killer bug. Chris is probably most responsible for popularizing this fly, especially among Tenkara anglers, and quite a lot of Tenkara fishers here in the U.S. do fish the killer bug to great effect. Chris also ties a more Tenkara flavored version of the killer bug called the killer kebari. And then the DVD wraps up with a couple special guests who tie their own killer flies. Rob Worthing from TenkaraGuides.com shows us the Utah killer bug. And Rob also shares a story of obsession with finding just the right yarn. He found a yarn a little different from Chris Stewart's yarn, and this is how he found it.
I spent 2 afternoons with the fine ladies at Blazing Needles Yarn Company in Salt Lake City, Utah. They were nice enough to follow me around the store, and as I pointed to things, they would slice off a little piece for me. I'd tie up a fly in the shop. They gave me a glass of water. I dropped the fly in the water, looked at it from the bottom, and finally found a couple of colors that I liked.
And another special guest, Eric Ostrander, also of TenkaraGuides.com, ties the Utah killer kebari. The fly tying videos on this DVD are not just bound to the bench like so many fly tying videos are. You will also see many of the flies behave underwater, in current, so you can see what that particular hackle looks like in fast-moving water. If you've ever wondered the difference in behavior between pheasant, partridge, and starling hackle, you'll find out on this DVD.
But this particular part of the feather is so mobile that just the slightest current variation will make it move.
And there's no need to take notes during the fly tying videos about what materials you'll need to tie that fly, because the DVD comes with a little booklet inside the case that lists the recipes for every fly that you'll see tied on the DVD. This is a great DVD. It's 19 fly tying videos covering 17 different patterns, 2.5 hours of high quality video, no filler, great flies tied by some really great people. I think this is probably the best fly tying DVD that has ever been produced. And if you disagree, you can get your money back, because every purchase you make at LearnTenkara.com is backed by a 100%, no questions asked, money back guarantee. So navigate your way to LearnTenkara.com and get your hands on this thing.